Hi, this is Craig Stocks here at Utah Desert Remote Observatories. You can find us online at utahdesertremote.com. And today I'm going to talk about this image of the Flaming Star Nebula and the Tadpoles Nebula, and something a little different. Normally I have already processed the image once when I go through it for the video. This time we're going to go through it together for the first time and see what we can learn. So as I usually do, this is going to be a combination of PixInsight, but really mostly Photoshop. I've already processed the image in PixInsight, so we are going to pick up after the basic processing in PixInsight. But kind of an interesting story behind this target. I started the target a few weeks ago when I still had the monochrome camera on the Takahashi FSQ-106. That's a 530 millimeter focal length. And I gathered a little bit of narrowband hydrogen, oxygen, sulfur, not very much, and really only had sufficient detail to process with hydrogen. So I do have the hydrogen data from the monochrome camera, but then I switched the cameras around and I put the color camera on. And so now I also have RGB from a one-shot color camera with just a clear glass filter, as well as from the L-eNhance filter. And then I have stars from each one of these. These, of course, have been processed and stretched, so they're starless images. We have the stars from the luminosity, the plain RGB. Nice, colorful stars, big fluffy stars here in the center. Also of interest is the stars from the hydrogen alpha from the monochrome camera. And notice how much tighter and smaller those stars are. So what I'm probably going to do is use the stars from the hydrogen alpha with the color from the luminosity, and I may even use a little bit of the stars themselves from here, just depending on how it looks. And then we'll also be interesting to explore the difference between the hydrogen alpha with the monochrome camera versus the hydrogen alpha from the color camera and the one-shot narrowband filter with, in this case, the Optolong L-eNhance. I'm not real sure how many images, so let's just take a quick look at the FITS header. This is for the L-eNhance data, and this is 21 images, so 21 frames at 600 seconds or 10 minutes each. So that'd be 210 minutes, so just short of 3 hours. And then from the monochrome, if we look at the FITS header for that, this is here somewhere, 3 images. So this is only 3 10-minute images, so 30 minutes versus almost 3 hours of data for the monochrome versus the L-eNhance. So that'll be interesting to compare. So let's open all of this stuff in Photoshop. And to do that, we're going to hop over to Photoshop. And if you've watched any of my videos before, you know what I'm going to do. File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack. And that brings up this dialog box where we can browse for the files we want to add. And these are all going to be on the D drive in my Astro Nook 2 folder for the Flaming Star Nebula. And there are the master lights that have been stretched and saved as 16-bit TIFFs. And then now that I have the files listed, I just click OK to load those files. Philosophically, I tend to think of PixInsight as being the ideal tool for processing astronomical data. I tend to think of Photoshop as being the ideal tool for processing photos. And really, for me, once I stretch an image, I'm dealing with a photo. I'm not dealing with astronomical data anymore. So it becomes, I may want to tend more towards preserving the astronomical detail or more towards exploring the artistic side. But either way, I'm optimizing a photo. I'm no longer doing astro processing. At least that's the way I think of it. So first thing we need to do is organize our layers into layer groups. So we've got the stars, two of the stars layers on top. So I'll, excuse me, put those into a group, Control G, name the group stars, and we're going to put this into screen blending mode, which allows everything below to show through. And right now, that RGB layer is on top. This would be with um, the stars from the hydrogen. So this is actually just a grayscale, so everything's black and white in the hydrogen stars. The RGB stars, of course, have color. If we want the color from the RGB stars and the shape from the hydrogen alpha stars, because they're smaller, all we have to do is change the blending mode for the color stars from normal into color. And now we have a combination of the shape coming from the hydrogen alpha stars and the color coming from the RGB stars. And that's probably a pretty good balance. So we'll just leave that where it is for now. So I'm going to collapse that group, turn it off. Next is the RGB layer. So I'll drop that into a group. Just name this RGB. This doesn't need a lot of cleanup, although there is some blue and maybe a little bit of yellow color from the bright stars in the center where these bright stars are. And I want to tone that down, and I'll have to change both the brightness and the color to tone those down. So I'm going to add two blank layers inside this RGB layer group. The first layer is going to be for burning and dodging, or darkening and lightening. So it's going to be in soft light blending mode, so I can paint with either a black or a white brush to darken and lighten. And we'll name it Burn and Dodge. And then the next layer is going to be just for the color. So I'll put it in color blending mode and name this color so we can keep track of it. Color, incidentally, you'll notice in this bottom group there's hue, saturation, color, and luminosity. Luminosity is pretty self-explanatory. Color is the combination of both saturation and hue. So there are times when you want just the hue and not the saturation, so in those cases you would use the hue blending mode rather than the color blending mode. So to start with, I'm going to darken these a little bit, I think. So I'll go to the Burn and Dodge layer. I'm going to tap B to pull up the brush tool. D will give me the default colors of black in the foreground, white in the background. And I already have an opacity of 10%, and that's a pretty good place to start. I'll use in this case, the right bracket key to make the brush bigger. The left bracket key would make it smaller. And I'm just going to darken these regions a little bit. And I don't know how well it comes through in the video, but there is some color effect. So now I'm going to go to the color layer, and I want to sample a nearby color. So I'm going to just grab a color sample by holding down the alternate key. That brings up the color sampler. Click there to get a color, and I can jump this up to 50% opacity by just tapping the 5 key. And I think this is pretty much all about the same color, and this may be a little bit more red down here. Maybe some more red up here. So probably something like that. I'm just changing the color. Now I need to go back to the Burn and Dodge layer, back to 10% opacity by tapping the 1 key, and then I'll darken these down to blend them in. And that looks pretty realistic to me on the screen. You can turn off these layers. That's before and that's after. And when we turn the stars on, stars are still there nice and big, but they don't have that big glow around them, which I don't know if that was from high clouds or from the dust or what was causing that, but I like it better without that. So we know we're going to wind up adding a levels adjustment layer inside the RGB group. So I'll go ahead and add that. and I'll probably add a hue saturation as well. So I'm just anticipating what adjustment layers I might need inside this group. And with that, we can close this group, turn it off, and now we're looking at the L-eNhance group. Again, Control G. I'll just label this LE for L-eNhance. The first thing we need to do is clean up some of these big filter reflections. I'm going to do that with the Remove tool, which is under the Healing tools. Again, because it's a brush-based tool, I can change the brush size with the left and right bracket keys. And I'm just going to make it a little bigger than each one of those reflections and click over the reflection like so. Not sure if there's another one. That seems to be the extent of it. I think that's actually something real, not a reflection. So now that I have selected those, and notice that in the options bar, I have not checked sample all layers, and we have not checked remove after each stroke. So that's what let me click multiple places. Now I can just click on the check mark or press enter to execute this, and Photoshop will remove those. And yes, I am removing those on the layer. Or more properly, in a perfect non-destructive workflow, I would actually be putting these corrections on a separate layer. Now that those are gone, there is a little bit of that hazy glow here. So again, I'm going to add 2 layers, one for burn and dodge, and one for color, just like we did before. And the color layer will be in color blending mode. Burn and dodge will be in soft light blending mode. Grab my brush, and these don't have as much of a color effect, so actually I think just darkening it probably does what we need done to even that out. Now I think there's an overall color cast here, so I want to find the darkest part in here and neutralize the black background. So to do that, I'm going to come up above, I'm going to go all the way up to the top, so above the RGB layer and below the stars, and I'm just going to add a solid color black layer and put it in divide blending mode, and you'll notice everything turns white. Now I'll come back to the L-eNhance layer, and I'll add a levels adjustment layer, and what we want to do is darken the blacks with this levels adjustment layer to find the darkest point in this image, and I should say the darkest meaningful point. Well, it might be in here, or it might be further out. It could also be up here. Let's see. I think I'm going to call this the darkest meaningful point up here, and we'll fine tune a little bit to find out where that, so it looks like right in here. So I'm going to click and hold on the eyedropper, choose the color sampler, and drop a sample point right here in that black area. Now I'll turn off that solid black layer, reset our adjustment layer, and I'm going to change its name to black level, and that's all I'm going to use this adjustment layer for. And what I want to do is adjust the black point to 19, 19, 19. And you can see it's actually kind of has a cyan cast now, and actually there's another reflection from the filter, so we'll come back and fix that when we're done. So we have to raise the red from 13 to 19. So in the levels adjustment layer, I'll choose the red channel, and in order to brighten the black level, I need to use this bottom slider to change the minimum black level, and we'll just increase that until we get a reading of 19 over here in the info palette. That's 18, there's 19. Now we'll go to the green and blue channels. Green channel we need to darken, so that'll be the upper slider, and just darken it to 19. And lastly is the blue. We'll darken it to 19. And there we go. So that has given us a more neutral background. We need to come down to the image itself, grab our healing tool, and just click on that to get rid of that filter reflection. And I'm still not 100% sure if this is a reflection or something real, so we'll leave it for now. So that is our L-eNhance layer. And lastly, this is our hydrogen alpha layer. Again, we'll put that in a group, change the name to hydrogen. This doesn't need a whole lot of cleanup, so it's pretty good as it is. It came out nice and clean. We are going to use it in conjunction with the others. So I'm going to add a hue saturation adjustment layer to give this layer some color. And since it's hydrogen, we want it to be red. So I'll click on Colorize, change the lightness to -50. Saturation to 100%, and we'll just leave the hue at red for now. And we'll wind up putting this probably in screen blending mode and moving it up above the L-eNhance. So there's a combination now of our L-eNhance. This is with and without the L-eNhance. This is with and without the hydrogen. And the hydrogen probably needs to be darkened a little bit, so we'll darken the black. I don't know if there's a lot of oxygen. It looks like there is a fair amount down here in the L-eNhance data. Let's try something. Let's try making a duplicate of this whole L-eNhance. So I'm going to just do a keyboard shortcut of Control-J to duplicate this entire group. And I'm going to change the name to L-eNhance Oxygen. And we want just the green and blue channels from this, but we want the green and blue channels in all three, red, green, and blue, so it's a monochrome image. So the first thing I'll need to do is I'm going to come up here above our adjustments, and I'm going to extract just the green and blue channels. To do that, I'm going to use a channel mixer, and in the red channel, I want 0 red, 50% of the green channel and 50% of the blue channel. And then in the green channel, I want the same 0, 50, 50. And in the blue channel, I want the same thing, 0, 50, 50. So that gives me an RGB, all three channels of just the blue and green, which is cyan, which is where the oxygen data would be in a dual narrowband. Now, if I colorize this, I'll do it the same way with a hue saturation in colorize blending mode, lightness to -50, saturation 100%, and this is going to be cyan, which is 180 degrees on the hue. So now we have cyan on the oxygen, and I can adjust these independently. Just for fun, let's turn off the L-eNhance at the bottom. So now we're getting red from the hydrogen layer, and we're getting cyan from the blue and green in the L-eNhance data. It probably gets a little confusing. And with that, we can probably brighten. Give the hydrogen a little bit more of a presence. And we can also independently adjust the brightness of this oxygen. Maybe something like that. So that's looking interesting. If we let's compare that. So what we have right now is hydrogen from a monochrome camera, and we have oxygen taken from the L-eNhance green and blue channels. If we compare that to just the L-eNhance, the L-eNhance by itself leans more towards the red from the hydrogen. When we took them apart and put them back together, we balanced it with a little bit more in favor of the oxygen to give it a little bit more neutral look, maybe less red dominant, although I would probably increase the saturation quite a bit. Let's see what happens when we add our RGB. Right now the RGB layer group is in pass-through blending mode, which is the default for a layer group. Let's put it in screen blending mode also. And of course that's going to be too strong, so we'll darken it down a little bit. And to me that's starting to get real interesting. The RGB data has a lot more of this dust cloud around the flaming star. Gives us a little bit more detail, I think, in the tadpoles. And let's add some global adjustments now. So above the RGB and below the stars, I'm going to add a global levels adjustment layer, color balance, hue saturation, and then a solid color 191919, which I can get by typing 131313 as hexadecimal into this bottom, which is actually the default field when you first open the solid color picker. Click OK. And we're going to put this in lighten blending mode. And what that does, it just keeps any portion of this image from being any darker than RGB 191919. So if I go to this global levels and darken the blacks, at some point that this 191919 layer takes over. And just to illustrate that, let's put a mask on this. So I'm going to grab the polygonal lasso tool, and I'll just make a triangular mask. Something like that. And then we'll fill that with black. Control D to deselect. And what this is going to let me do, this 191919 layer now is only visible on the top left half of the image. So when I darken the blacks, at some point you'll start to, if I go too far, you can really see the demarcation here. So above this line is the 191919 layer taking over. Below it is, because that layer is masked, we're able to darken things all the way down to 0. And usually what I try to do is find a point where you can just begin to see an effect. So I'm looking in this area of the image right now, and right now that's where, when I darken the blacks, that's where it really first starts to have an effect. So that's probably about where I want the black level to be. So now I'll just turn off this mask, and now we have the 191919 layer active everywhere. Let's just do a quick color balance. I don't know if I want. I'm just playing with these little bit of magenta. Let's increase the color saturation, and I'm going to really target the color saturation of the reds and take the reds up, and then I may just add a little bit of yellow into the reds. That gives us a little bit nicer. So at this point I'm really just playing with what looks good. Let's see what happens if we, there's not a whole lot of cyan or blue in this. Most of those are white, and that's okay. If we want more blue, we can come down to the L-eNhance with the oxygen and do a couple things. We can brighten that, which will give us a little bit more prominence of blue. We can also adjust the rotation of the hue a little bit and go from cyan to just a little bit more blue. And you can see just a little bit goes a long way, but it does put a little bit more blue into the oxygen. And then I may want to do the same thing with the hydrogen, adjust that hue just ever so slightly away from pure red and towards the yellow. And I'm feeling like that's a pretty nice combination. I think I'm going to let the background be a little lighter. Let a little bit more of that show through. And let's turn the stars on. I feel like that's looking good. These, oops. So this is the RGB stars. And if I put those in normal blending mode, that's what the normal RGB stars look like. This is the hydrogen alpha stars. And just again, this is the hydrogen alpha with the color coming from the RGB stars. If we want to pick up just a little bit of that glow, I'm going to duplicate the RGB layer, put it in lighten blending mode, and then play with the opacity and just give it just a little bit of opacity. That gives us just a little bit more glow. And I think I want to remove some of the little stars overall. To me, it starts to look a little noisy with all the little stars. So I'm just going to grab all three of these stars layer, right-click, and put those into a smart object. And then to knock out the little stars, we're going to use Filter, Noise, Dust and Scratches, and we'll try a value of 4. You can see what that did. It knocked out the little stars, but didn't really affect the big stars. So I think that looks pretty good. We've got the prominence of the bright stars in the center. We've minimized the little stars around the edge. We've got a nice red-blue color contrast going. I'm sure it could be fine-tuned a little bit, but this is looking pretty good. So at some point you just need to stop. Now, other things I could do is go through each one of these layers and convert to a smart object and apply a smart sharpen filter, as well as some probably a high pass filter to add a little local contrast. But this is a pretty good place to stop. The last thing I would do with this is save this as a full resolution, all layers intact Photoshop.psb file, and then open it in Lightroom, and that's where I would do all the final crops, final color balance, color correction, hue, saturation, things like that, sharpening, and then save it as the JPEG that you're going to see online. You, of course, will have already seen the JPEG. I don't know what it's going to look like quite yet. So I hope you found this useful. If you have any questions, be sure to drop those in the comments down below. And if you're interested in renting hourly data from one of our telescopes, or even putting a remote telescope at our location, I'm sure you would be happy. Our goal is the best customer service in the industry, and we really try to live up to that. It's not just a tagline. So if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. Reach out to us if you are interested in any sort of a rental. And with that, I hope you have a great day today and an even better night tonight under a clear, dark sky. Thanks.